Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us as we have a lot of experts here to answer your questions on how to play chess on a trampoline and how to innovate in an era of uncertainty. I hope you've seen Brad Anderson's digital breakout, DB145. We'll be answering questions based on his session this afternoon or yesterday, depending on where you're coming in from. I do have a couple of preliminary things I need to get out of the way before we start answering your questions. So if I can get that slide advanced, please. Thank you. When you need to ask a question, just use the chat. We're in Microsoft Teams live event, so use the chat. Questions will appear once our moderators say, yes, that's a good question to appear. And then we'd love it if you could upvote some questions so we know how important that question also is to you and to your company. Our experts, some of them will answer it live, so I'll read some questions, and then some questions will be answered by our moderators in the background. And the experts can provide more resources. We'll have some links up at the end of the session as well, so make sure you stay for the end for those links. Some etiquette, this session may be recorded. If you don't want your question being read out loud, I would recommend that you either don't type one into the chat window or go ahead and hang up now and ask us in another session, but the session may be recorded. Help our moderators, don't spam or post inappropriate comments. We have a code of conduct coming up. We really just want you all to be adults, and we all just want to have a good time this morning or this evening or this afternoon. So please adhere to the code of conduct. That code of conduct will be pasted into the chat window if it hasn't been already. And here's a quick view for those of you that can read that fast. My name is Joe Lurie, and I'm hosting this session today. I'm a senior product manager with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. I'm probably the least important person on this call, so I will let my experts with their pictures up in the right corner take it away and introduce themselves real fast. We'll start with Chris.
Yeah, hi, Chris Jackson, and I am an architect for Windows Security and the Edge browser inside of our customer experience team.
Thanks, Chris. Mayank? Mike, you might be muted. Or you might be disconnected. We'll come back to Mayank. Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Williams. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Edge team.
Great, thanks. And Michael.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael Deneen. I'm a program manager in the Intune customer experience engineering team, and I'm located in Australia.
Great. We also have, you can see we have a whole slew of experts that can help both Microsoft employees and engineers, and also we have some of our valued MVPs helping us as well.
I'm doing a quick audio check. Can you guys hear me now?
We can, thanks.
Okay,
and Maya,
awesome.
Go ahead and introduce yourself. We are going to pass right by you.
Sorry about that earlier. So yeah, hi, my name is Mayank. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Microsoft Endpoint Manager based here in Redmond.
Great, thanks. So basically the flow is right now, I'm going to start reading your questions as you type them in. The questions I've seen so far are actually pretty long. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more than I would normally to answer these questions. But I'm going to start with Greg has a question that's open right now. My org is currently migrating our Windows 10 devices from another AV solution to Defender, thank you very much, deployed and managed via Intune. But we use Intune exclusively and do not use System Center. We are also not currently fully licensed for ATP, although we do have E3. Because of this, we are missing a feature we have had previously, namely email notification to IT when threat detection on an endpoint is detected on an endpoint device. It's my understanding that a solution exists for this. Chris, can you talk about that, the integration with ATP and Intune?
So yeah, well, the specific question is, what do we have without ATP? And actually, I'm going to pass that on to my colleagues in the Intune space for any additional details there, because obviously we do have that fully integrated in the full security stack. E5 represents our posture on what everything should be there, which will have all the notifications you need. And I'm not sure what capabilities we have with sort of E3, which is sort of the management level SKU alone. I don't know if any of my colleagues can speak to that.
I don't know if there's someone else to cover that, but from what I understand of the question, you do need to be licensed for ATP to use the ATP features, if that's what they're referring to. Even though Intune can be managed with an E3 license, And I believe that feature that they're talking about might be the security tasks feature, like where they say eBay notification when a threat is detected on an endpoint device. So that would work once you are licensed for ATP, which is an E5, Windows E5 or Microsoft 365 E5.
That's, yep, thanks so much for that. And just as an FYI, for those of you that might have missed the news yesterday or hour this morning, we actually did rename Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Nothing else changed really, but we've rebranded that name, and there's a whole slew of new features available, and you can see those as some of our on-demand sessions. So, Mayank, while we have you, why don't you, we don't have a lot of questions coming in right now. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Tenant Attach and Cloud Management Gateway and some of those ways that we can make sure our home users and our remote users are still being taken care of?
Yes, and we do actually have a lot of questions that have already been answered by the amazing team that we have here. So people who are on the chat are probably seeing the answers, but we can definitely talk about some of these on air as well. So if you guys saw Brad's session, Tenant Attach is absolutely the first thing that you need to do in order to start your cloud management journey. And it's not mandatory, it's a choice. So if you are on Configuration Manager and there is, it's difficult for your organization because of maybe other reasons, other investments that you've made, and you're not able to adopt Intune immediately, one thing that you can do is Tenant Attach. What that really means is that your devices will not be managed by the cloud. Your devices will continue to be managed by Configuration Manager, but Configuration Manager itself will talk to the cloud and will start getting a lot of the value of the cloud right away. So for example, Endpoint Analytics, which is something new that we announced today, it's going GA. So you would start to get Configuration Manager device information in your Endpoint Manager admin console once you enable Tenant Attach. That's just one example. There are many other things you can do, like remote actions, getting visibility to those devices, even when they're remote, when they're outside of the office, which is pretty common nowadays.
Right.
And I was just saying that once you're ready for the next step, then you can do co-management, which will then add those devices themselves to the cloud as well.
Great, thanks. I'm going to ask, I think, Michael, this next question. Nazir just put in, hi, everyone. What is the best way to export and import Intune settings from one tenant to another? I like to clone as much as I can from our working test environment to prod. Michael, is there a way that we can take the settings from one tenant and import them into the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're able to query all of the settings using Graph API. So I've got a customer who's doing this at the moment. They basically are doing a migration exactly as what this person has asked. And they're basically querying the Graph API for one tenant, storing that in a repository in Azure DevOps, and then pushing that onto a secondary tenant. So yeah, Graph API is absolutely able to export all of those settings and then be able to deploy it to another tenant.
Great, thanks so much for that. I do see, Mike, you mentioned there's a lot of questions I've already asked. We already have more than a dozen questions that have been asked and answered before I got a chance to even read them. And even the questions that I see now look like they are being replied to. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one from Bill before someone else answers it. Please consider allowing an E3 license company to get email notification on virus detection without going to an E5 license. Thanks, Bill. We just talked about that. So that's definitely something that we'll bring back to our, Mayank and I are actually on that team. So it's something that we can bring up in one of our meetings. We have a question. We don't use Configuration Manager today, so can Intune manage all of our Intune mobile devices as well as our on-premises Windows 10 devices? So the question is, if we don't use Configuration Manager, can Intune manage all of our mobile devices and our on-prem Windows 10 devices? I think I'm going to go back to Chris for that one. I'm pretty sure all four of my experts could answer it. I'm going to start with Chris.
Sure. So I'm trying to get the exact question you're reading off here to make sure I get all the nuance here.
So it looks like they're Win 10, and I'm just going to guess here because that's as far as we have. It looks like they're Active Directory joined, not Azure AD joined, or probably not even hybrid because they simply just called on-prem Win 10 devices. Can Intune manage those? And I know we can do that we can start with Configuration Manager and Tenant attached co-management, but they don't use Configuration Manager. We don't use Configuration
so they're not
Manager
using
today.
config man, and so they're managing mobile devices, managing on-prem Win 10 device. I mean, that's really a core scenario, is the ability to have a single pane of glass behind which you apply all of them. I mean, obviously, one of the differences is you'll be, typically crafting different policies for each of them, because obviously the platforms support different things. But you will be able to use the exact same solution. In fact, that's one of the core scenarios, is here's the single place to manage all of your endpoints.
Great, thanks. I'm going to ask Michael this question that Anonymous asked. Thank you, Anonymous, for posting this. When looking at enterprise data protection, MAM covers Android, iOS. Windows Information Protection covers Windows 10. I believe only option for Mac OS is Azure RMS. Is there another solution, or can we expect anything on the roadmap? And then it goes on, but we'll stop with that part. And then after that, they actually posted MAM for Mac OS, not iOS. So when looking at enterprise data protection, MAM covers Android. WIP covers Windows 10. What option is there for Mac OS? Is that only Azure RMS?
I'm not entirely sure about the whole MIP solution for Mac OS, but certainly if you have access to a browser on Mac OS, you can definitely start applying sensitivity labeling via Edge. If you were to access any of your documentation or any of your documents through Edge, yeah, we can definitely start to apply sensitivity labeling via MIP on Mac OS.
Great, thanks. And let's see, other questions that have not been asked yet. I'm going to go down. There's an Endpoint Analytics question. It's about some documentation on Endpoint Analytics. As we know, Endpoint Analytics, it went general availability today, and all the docs have been updated on that. But with Endpoint Analytics, the question is from John D. Endpoint Analytics proactive remediation requires PowerShell execution policy change. This reduces the security for PowerShell. Are there any good documents on securing PowerShell? Our docs pages and even our privacy pages, we'll talk about some of that. But definitely on our docs pages, our PowerShell pages, you can get information on how to secure PowerShell and work within your organization. And I'm looking for any new questions that haven't been asked. I'm going to ask Colleen some questions about Microsoft Edge that I don't see in the window, but we made some announcements on Microsoft Edge today. Do you want to talk about some of the new features in Edge that might excite some of our attendees?
Yes, we couple things we announced. Linux is coming to our dev channel. That will land in the October timeframe. So that has been a very big request from all of our users. So we have been fast and furiously working on that. So that is coming very soon. I believe Satya and Brad spoke about endpoint data loss prevention. So endpoint DLP, so that's available, as well as what we're working on is being able to manage unmanaged devices. So from the work from anywhere that we've all become accustomed to in 2020, sometimes people want to use their personal devices. However, corporate information, data, all of that good stuff still needs to be protected. So one of the things that we are partnering with our Intune folks is how to keep these personal devices safe and secure. And so we are working on that. So there's a couple of announcements there. We have some security claims from our NSS Labs partners that I would refer to the Edge blog, which I will put in the chat for everybody to go take a look at. Gosh, off the top of my head, I think that's it.
Yep,
I'm
no,
sure
that's perfect. Yep. I've seen some questions in some of the other sessions about Edge on Linux. Satya announced that this morning.
Yes.
I've seen in our Microsoft Endpoint Management Admin Center, I've seen the Edge security baselines to help secure Edge right off the bat as soon as it's deployed. So it's a lot of great things we're doing with Edge.
Yes, very exciting.
Yep, absolutely. I have a question for Colleen. This is from Keishan. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I have a question for Colleen. I watched through the YouTube vids this morning and on on-demand video. I'm wondering that since the browser is very important now, why not have a dedicated admin center for Edge Chromium instead of peppering Edge settings and Intune, an IE mode admin center? It makes more sense to me to unit all Edge settings in its dedicated admin center. Basically, the question is, we can manage Edge from a few different places. Why not have, like Teams has its own admin center, Office has its own admin center. Why not Edge?
Yeah. That's interesting. So what we get asked for is to incorporate with the M365 Admin Center where appropriate and available. So that's where IT admins have been going to in managing their applications outside of from the Intune and Endpoint Manager perspective. So if you watch the IE mode video on YouTube, you'll see that we are working on bringing in the management of the enterprise mode site list into the M365 Admin Center. That's just more friendly to manage in a cloud-based solution. So I don't think it's something we want to build our own admin center with, but we want to go ahead, as we are part of the M365 story, that we want to be a part of the M365 admin center. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do tout a lot of our single pane of glass functionality within MEM, as well as Microsoft 365 Admin Center, which is where you'll go for things like productivity score, and a lot of that is being built into, as you said, into a single console. I saw a question that disappeared. I'm guessing one of my brilliant experts answered it in the background, so it's gone. I guess I'm going to have to go to Colleen again for Grady's question. Is there anything going on with Edge to reduce the amount of memory it consumes? I am regularly seeing Edge hang around 1.5 gig of RAM consumed. I'd like to, I wish there was a way to ask a clarifying question. What version of Windows 10 are you on? What version of Edge are you on if you're on one of the inside, or which preview version are you on? But so what have we done, Colleen, to make that easier on our users consuming less RAM?
Yeah, so it's always performance, and RAM is always a work in progress. And since we were part of the Chromium open source project, it's something that we've partnered with on the Chromium side. What you will see coming soon, and I believe it is now available under a flag in the Edge Canary build, is a sleeping tabs feature. So this allows for tabs to go to sleep, if you will, if they haven't been accessed after a certain period of time. And so that should be helpful in freeing up some memory and RAM. But this is an ongoing process, and I love the feedback that that you've provided here. And again, what type of machine you're on, what version you're on, all of those things play in, but this is something that we continue to work on.
Great, thanks. I'm going to ask Mayank this question from Anonymous. Is the new DLP Windows 10 native function going to be available at the M365 level? Trying to understand if current O365 E5 licenses can use it with an add-on EMS. Do we know that yet? Do you know what license is required for the Windows 10 DLP? My guess is, Mayank, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that it'll require at least a Windows 10 E3, not an O365, but probably some Windows 10 form of license would be required.
Yes, and my understanding is that the feature is still in preview, if I'm not wrong. So the licensing will become clearer when it goes for GA, because between now and then, that's when the licensing, if it has not already been clarified, it generally gets clarified at the time of GA. So we'll have to just wait and
hold
watch.
off till then.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thanks, Mayank. I'm going to ask Michael this question from Ed. Is there a way to distribute BIOS updates with Intune?
There definitely is for Surface devices, yes. So if you're using Surface devices, we can push out the firmware and everything like that. It's completely integrated into Intune. Unfortunately, not at the moment for other device manufacturers that I know of.
All right, thanks. And I know Brad had made some announcements today integrating things from Dell and HP. I can't say specifically that they were BIOS updates in Intune, but I know that we've definitely integrated some of their features for other reasons within Intune console or the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console. So I would keep my eye out for that for some of the other OEMs as well. And again, everyone's answering too quickly. I'm going to ask a question from Anonymous. And Colleen, I'm sorry to put you on the spot again. Has the favorite sync issue been fixed? If I have 2+ devices and at least one of them hasn't been used in a while, when I finally use Edge on that device, I found that many of the has been deleted favorites got resurrected. I now have more than 10,000 favorite items just because of that.
Gosh, that sounds fun. 10,000 favorites. I've been on the browser since IE9. I can tell you that favorites is very challenging. So I do believe the issues have been fixed. If you are still seeing problems, though, it'd be really great if you filed feedback in the preview channels, dev or beta. If you're seeing this on the stable channel, yeah, I would love to know more. But I know that we're always, trying to make sure favorites are going well, and if you are having some sync issues and resurrecting deleted ones. That was from a while ago, if I remember correctly. I think that's been fixed, but would love to understand more if you're still seeing it and if you could file feedback.
That's a great point, Colleen. Thanks for that. And that goes with a lot of our features. If you have any questions or having issues, the feedback hub for Windows 10 gets feedback directly back to the product group that owns that feature. And Edge being still in this way, Edge is still coming down. Filing feedback for Edge as well goes right to the Edge team. It doesn't go to some empty mailbox somewhere. I have a question from Andrew, and I'm gonna pose it to Michael, and then we'll see if it needs to go somewhere else. The integration for conditional access and Dell to PowerShell. When does this become preview GA, and does it extend to custom scripts? Excuse me if this was covered in Brad's session. I missed a little bit at the end. So we're looking at conditional access and Dell through PowerShell. It's actually what we were just talking about, that some of the Dell features are coming into Intune.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not too up to date with that. I might have to hand off to one of the other experts to see if we can answer it.
Okay.
And maybe I can chime in about the conditional access piece of it. I'm not sure if that's what the person asking intended to ask, but we do have the device compliance capability that a lot of people are interested in. So I'm not sure if that was the intent of the question, because there's a lot of conditional access value that you get for third-party MDMs. So not necessarily Dell, but other MDMs would be able to then integrate with Intune and Azure Active Directory to do conditional access for things like Office 365. And that is something that has been made available to the partners. And the release timing of that feature will depend on the partners, not on us. So you need to follow up with the partners on exactly where is their plan to, after they finish testing it and taking it through their regular test cycles, they would then release it. And you would still need an Intune license to use it, though.
You do. And go back and watch Brad's session, because he does talk about how that integration with Dell can be used for things like conditional access. And then he goes to customize one of those settings and shows it within PowerShell. So Brad does cover that in his session. So go back and read that. I have a follow-up question on, are you able to give insight on Microsoft 365 Lighthouse capabilities? Does it allow to set policies across multiple tenants? And Lighthouse is something new that we announced this morning with Brad. So I'm going to first ask Michael if he can give any information on Lighthouse, and if not, we'll see where we can go from there.
No, I can't give very much information on Lighthouse at all, but my understanding of it from Brad's session is that it allows visibility across multiple tenants that you may have management over. So I'm going to tentatively say no, but I'm happy for someone else to jump in and correct me.
Yeah, it's basically, that's my understanding of it as well. It helps the MSP work with multiple tenants at the same time, right? They have a lot of different clients that they're trying to assist. So the capabilities from what I gather on the capabilities is just what you said, Michael. It helps you just have visibility across multiple tenants.
There are a couple of questions, Joe, if you want me to just flag something from the ones that we've already answered, but might be worth repeating.
Yeah,
is that okay?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are two areas of confusion that I saw in the questions. So one was regarding endpoint analytics and desktop analytics, and I think somebody asked a question about sort of what's the breadth of data in endpoint analytics versus desktop analytics. So I just wanted to take a minute to clarify that only the name is similar, right? So like they're really not the same feature, or they're not trying to solve the same problem. And I wish we had named it a little differently, but desktop analytics is mainly to help you upgrade and migrate from, say, Windows 7 to Windows 10, or go from Windows 10 to a newer feature update of Windows 10. So the main purpose of that feature is to help with compatibility, of driver compatibility, application compatibility, and so on. Endpoint analytics is much broader. It ties up into our productivity score strategy or story, and that really helps you to get a handle on your device health, or device health and end user experience. So very different from compatibility that desktop analytics is trying to solve. So both are valuable, both are necessary, and they both have their separate places in your overall strategy. Just wanted to make sure that the distinction is clear.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying that, Mike. So, Chris, we have a question. Would there be any VPN considerations to take into account when deploying a configuration manager apps via company portal?
Any VPN considerations?
So your customer, your endpoint is working remotely.
Mhm.
We announced that company portal can be used to deploy configuration manager apps. Do they still need a VPN into the configuration manager environment? Is the way I read that question, in order to deploy those apps from company.
And to me, that would depend upon the architecture of how they've deployed and configured configuration manager. In today's world, what we would say is that architecture, really should be, cloud enabled and allow me to get it from various points. But there certainly are a lot of legacy architectures that will be, dependent on you're on my specific network, and that's how I do that control. So certainly, if you have that, I mean, it's not that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does block some scenarios that are pretty valuable. So it certainly would be one reason to be thinking about, moving more towards that, zero trust, accessible, via the cloud type of architecture. So that would be what I would invest in. So there's no magic sauce just by connecting it to Intune that suddenly makes the config-man deployment suddenly have different requirements.
Right. So I think the question might be, does the app still live on a distribution point somewhere, or is the app now living within Intune so company portal can deploy it? And I think it's the former. It still lives on.
Correct.
On the distribution point, so you still need access to that distribution point. Now, using something like Cloud Management Gateway, which can be a cloud distribution point, might help in that scenario without requiring the VPN. But again, as you said, it does depend on what the architecture actually looks like.
Exactly.
It's not
which
just
bring all the benefits too, right? Because there's benefits of having distribution points in a lot of cases. If you've got like a low bandwidth to the client, you can get it there once and then deploy it to everything, and you would still get all those benefits. It's a matter of picking the solution that works best for the scenario you've got.
Yeah, and it's not a yes/no question, right? There's a lot of different, and as much as I hate to say it depends, my former consultant in me loves to answer questions with it depends, because it depends. So I have a question here from Jason regarding using personal devices as the primary work device. Is there a page or documentation pack that clearly details what is possible for delivering and securing work-related apps and data whilst having minimal footprint and impact on the personal device? And so we're looking at the separation of corporate and personal on a single device. And one thing Heather just added up on the screen for us is a lot of links, and you'll find some of that answered right within our aka.ms Endpoint Manager link. But instead of making you read that, Michael, can you go ahead and help with that distinction between work and personal on a device?
On a single device?
On a single device. I have my personal iPhone, and I have my work email on it, right? And I access documents from my personal phone.
Yeah,
how does that
absolutely.
get separated out?
Good question. So definitely using conditional. Oh, sorry, not conditional access. Sorry, I've just had a completely a mind blank. I might have to hand over to someone else.
Chris, do you wanna answer that, or Mayank? I'm sorry to bounce it around.
Sure. So if the question's about securing your personal and your corporate on the same mobile device, we obviously have a lot of different ways you can do it. whether it's Android or iOS. I mean, they all have their own ways of doing it. At a very high level, I would say we have the notion of MAM, or mobile application management, that really helps you containerize the applications, the corporate applications on your device. So it's got different words, like if you're in the Android ecosystem, they call it work profile. So your work apps and work data stays in that work profile, and the rest of the device is your personal device. So for example, you decide to leave the company, or you're switching your device. So when you unenroll your device from the company's management, the only thing that the company wipes or removes on that device is the company apps and data. All your personal photographs, your personal files, your personal apps, even, they are not touched at all. So you can do that with Intune and Endpoint Manager for different platforms. Yes.
Yep. Thanks for that. We are out of time, but I do want to just say thanks for specifying, like, as in your answer, you said, for example, Android uses this. The question really just is worded as personal device. That could be a personal Windows 10 device, iOS, Android, and using something like MAM, we can, and Azure Information Protection, we can actually absolutely secure all of those different devices. So I do think we're out of time, and I can keep asking questions until someone says, yes, Joe, we're out of time. But I do show it looks like we're out of time. So I want to thank you all. Again, we have some links up on the screen from aka.ms/Microsoft Ignite 2020/mem in Windows for all the on-demand sessions that didn't quite make it into the Ignite catalog. aka.ms Endpoint Manager for everything we've talked about today. Microsoft.com/fast track to help with those, whether you're just getting into cloud management or you're trying to upgrade your devices. And aka.ms App Assure, which is our promise that if you have an app running on Internet Explorer, it will run in Edge. If it's running on Windows 7 or an earlier version of Windows 10, it will run on a recent version of Windows 10. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of Ignite.